sometimes none. I'm short-sighted myself, and mine was picked up by not being able to read an amusing bumper sticker on a car when the rest of the family could. For me, I didn't realize that I was sort of missing out on anything. And so in the early stages, that little bit of distance blur might not impact you too much in an obvious way. And if it creeps up on you, you kind of just get used to it. And certainly in the modern classroom, you talk to kids and they're using boards and screens a lot less now. And a lot of kids are at the front. And if they're at the front of the class, then they're at a distance where they can still see things. So yeah, so it can actually go unnoticed for the initial portion. Plus, I think it creeps up. So it doesn't just creep up. Sometimes the initial part of myopia occurs so quickly that you kind of get caught by surprise. And look, if and this is the reason why we say if there's a family history of myopia, sort of parents and siblings, then it's a good idea to get your kids checked recently to be trying to catch it as early as possible.
Yeah, I think anyone who wears prescription glasses has got like some kind of story such as yours. Like with me, I think I was about maybe 18, 17, 18, with some friends, driving, and I took a wrong turn heading towards the Gold Coast. My friends are in the back saying, where are you going? And I just literally like I misread the sign because,
Wow.
and it was at night as well. So, I think that maybe your night vision is the first to go. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and look, it was funny. I remember, the TVs when you and I were growing up. If you walked up close enough to them when they were off, you could actually see the little pixels on the screen. And so I always thought the TV screen was meant to look kind of pixelated and kind of fuzzy because it was made of pixels. And then after it got corrected, I went, no, I'm meant to be seeing it much more clearly, and not realizing that you can actually see the leaves on the trees from a distance. Those kind of little things that you kind of just don't notice because it creeps up on you. But yeah, you look, so it can go unnoticed initially, but eventually the kids will start to squint or make errors with copying or just not being able to see what they're asking the kid next to them or what's on the board, or and like in your case, just they're missing things in sport, or this just starts to become you know errors in performance and judgment and things like that.
I've got two kids, and one of them I think he's okay, but the other one I've noticed that I noticed that she was sitting closer and closer to the television, and I thought, okay, that this maybe that's a sign. That's a sign that we need to do something here.
Yeah, look, and some really young kids will do that because they want to get close to the screen and kind of tune out everything else, and they kind of get captured by whatever's on the screen. But if they're a primary school child that's becoming a new behaviour, then you certainly want to get that checked out. I just had a young fellow yesterday who we were concerned about his potential for becoming short-sighted because both parents were short-sighted. His sister's short-sighted, and one of the behaviours that prompted them to come back in was that he was walking up to the TV, which he hadn't done for a while at 8 years old. And sure enough, and he wasn't noticing any problems in the classroom. It was that behaviour of walking to the TV. And sure enough, we found that he was short-sighted. So
I have a link somewhere to um, there's a really interesting page online where it looks like a classroom. You can see like a perfect image of a classroom, and by adjusting the slider you can see like how that classroom becomes blurred depending on how severe your myopia is. I'm not
yes,
sure if you're familiar with that one.
look, I've seen something like that, and I think we can kind of think of blur like that, but there is the ability to still understand what you're looking at, even though it might be blurry.
Mm.
Uh, and so sometimes the human brain's fairly incredible at adapting to these things. So, the amount of blur that you might get in that kind of simulator may not be sort of properly match what someone's experience is, because it's a bit like, if you're reading letters on a chart, it might be difficult to identify those individual letters. But if we made those letters into a word, you could probably identify the word, even if a few of the letters were difficult to see. So the brain's able to kind of fill in the gap and make really good predictions about things. And I think this is the other reason why sometimes people might not notice it being a problem, because they're not actually sort of making as many mistakes as we think they might.
And of course, I think this is one of the misunderstandings that goes along with myopia is that maybe some people they hear about myopia and they think about, okay, well, yeah, sure, you have problems like seeing things at a distance, but just get a pair of specs, and you're good to go. That's problem solved, right? But there's actually like longer term implications to this.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, and part of the problem with just getting a pair of glasses is it doesn't stop it from getting worse. And so you've got that sort of increasing myopia that you just need to deal with, which is inconvenience on its own. But, a lot of the research is now indicating that the more short sighted you are, the higher the risk you have of developing other eye disease and eye problems as an adult. And, glaucoma, which is one where the pressure goes up in the eye. The problem with glaucoma is that it's a sneaky disease. You don't get a lot of symptoms from it until it's upon you. And often it's picked up through routine testing of pressures and other aspects of your vision. You've got a higher risk of getting a thing called a retinal detachment. So that's where the retina pulls away from the back of the eye effectively. As the eyeball grows, then the cornea, the retina itself gets stretched. And so you can get tears and breaks in that, and then that can actually pull away. That can result in sight loss and sight distortion. You've also got issues around developing a higher incidence of macular degeneration, particularly in very, very high amounts of myopia. So part of the overall global goal is that we want to reduce the number of people who get to that point of having a very high risk of these extra problems.
And some of those things, like especially macular degeneration, they're irreversible, aren't they? So once you've got a severe situation like that, there's not much you can do.
Yeah, and the type of macular problem you get with myopia is may well be different to the regular age-related macular issues. Absolutely.